Greetings and salutations, nerds. This is Praying for Superpowers,
a show about the deeper meanings, messages, and intricacies hidden within nerd culture. I'm Peter Jordahl.
And I'm Trevor Sharon, and today we are talking about wax and wane,
rusts
and ruin. Era 2 of the Mistborn series is probably one of my favorites. It is a Western-themed fantasy novel that builds off of the lore of the first era, and the heroes are amazing. And if it was ever made into a movie, we would need Nathan Fillion as Waxillium, and we would need Alan Tudyk as Wayne, because it would be amazing.
It'd be perfect. Get that man a brown coat again. I love it.
Amen.
I am such a big fan of Alloy of Law is my favorite Sanderson book, for sure. I think the villain is brilliant. I think the issues are brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole storyline is awesome, and I love the world. Wayne, however, is my favorite character. Wax is interesting. Maricy's interesting. The villains are interesting, but Wayne, a kleptomaniac who has a fear of guns, who's polyamorous.
Mm-hmm. Young, bandit, bringing up.
Like, he's just too interesting.
He's super funny throughout the books.
And the fact that he doesn't understand, it's not that he ignores laws, it's that he just doesn't grasp some things, not even on purpose. He does purposefully think that some things are more valuable than others. He's like, why would I want a gold frame when I could have a handkerchief? I don't have any use for that. It has no value to me.
Right.
It's pretty interesting.
Well, and I think what's really cool about Wayne particularly is his abilities. So he is a slider, which means that he can create a bubble around him where time moves faster in the bubble than it does outside. And he uses that ability to put on different disguises, to fight. He'll find somebody inside of a bubble and fight them inside and then run to another one. He is also a blood maker, which means that he can store his health into gold whatever and pull on that health later on. And so these two abilities work really well in tangent with each other. And I'm really, this is why I like Sanderson, because he'll take a system and then give you a combination and explore its possibilities. And it's so cool. And I think it does speak to how all of us have particular skills that we can develop in. And sometimes the skills work together in a way that we would never expect and turns out to be 5 times as awesome as the skills alone.
And which his skills, I think, are such a part of him that if he didn't have them, he wouldn't be as crazy as he is.
Totally.
Because he is crazy. And I mean that in he lets himself be injured because he knows he can heal. But it's part of his character that he lets himself be injured. He's a sacrificing person, even though it's not as big of a deal for him because it doesn't matter if he gets injured. He's still a sacrificing person.
And I think Waxillium Ladrian is a really interesting character. He's biracial, which is really interesting to look at. His terrace name is Athsenthru, and he grows up torn between these two worlds and with two abilities that are very different. And I think that having somebody who deals with identity throughout, and it's pretty subtle, so if you didn't notice it at first, that's not surprising. But if you look at the character, he is struggling to decide whether he's a terraceman, whether he is a coin shot.
Is he a nobleman? Is he a lawman? Is it more noble of him to work for his family and to do the honor of saving all of these people who would lose their homes and their jobs if he didn't manage the money?
And he's struggling with, when he goes to the roughs, he dresses up as a gentleman, and he's trying to have this juxtaposition between the two worlds, the aristocratic and the roughs. And then when he comes back to the aristocratic world, he's seen as a roughman. And so it feels as if he's trying to figure out who he is.
And he's stuck in the middle with no one else who's really like him.
And all he can sit with is, maybe I'm just a lawman. And so he invests into his work, which and so there's this idea of pro-social behaviors, and it's kind of like anti-social behaviors, but there are things that we would look at and say, like, yeah, that's really good. That's beneficial to society. It's not drugs or violence or all of these things that we would say are antisocial behaviors. And Waxillium shows a little bit of pro-social behavior in the amount of work that he does, where the idea is it's all about balance, where you can be a marathon runner and it can be in healthy balance. But as soon as you start ditching your family and pushing your body past the point where it's safe, that becomes a pro-social idea in some ways. Yeah. And so for Waxillium, he becomes such a lawmaker that it becomes a pro-social behavior, and it's a way for him to basically deal with his emotions, but he's not actually doing anything with them.
That's real heavy.
Totally.
Like Waxillium when he chooses to be. But
which brings us to Waxillium's powers.
Yeah. So Waxillium's powers are he can increase and decrease his weight. He can store weight in a metal mine, and then he can draw on it. And he's also a coin shot. So he can push on metal, bits of metal around him. And we learn from Chris when he's at the ballroom in the third book in New Saren that he and any combination of two powers creates a third ability unique to that combo of powers. His third ability is his steel bubble. No other steel pusher can create a bubble around them. It's specific to his ability, which is a really interesting thing. And like, the Lord Ruler was so powerful, but he was so okay with his level of power that he didn't explore all the abilities he had. Like, he had so many more than he ever wanted to find out.
Mm-hmm. And it's this idea of synergy that we see throughout. And I think that there is a huge amount of synergy between Waxillium and Wayne. And even if we include Marasi and Steris, we don't know if she is an Allomancer or not. I'm pretty sure she is. And Marasi is, but her ability, she feels, isn't worthwhile because she can slow time in a bubble rather than Wayne speed up time in a bubble.
So her example is, if I'm waiting for an opera to start, I can slow down time for myself, and then I don't have to wait as long as everyone else. But that's about the only time it's ever been useful. And she uses it 4 or 5 times that she surmises throughout the books in ridiculously helpful ways. But yet she still carries this idea that her father instilled in her, which is, that's a useless ability. You should kind of feel ashamed of that.
Mm-hmm. Which is something that I think we see in our own lives pretty often, where we get told something as a child and it sticks with us for a very long time. And I really like that with these characters, they're all dealing with some sort of identity that was spoken over them at one point. And how do I reconcile that with how I feel now, the way that I've grown? And it has some more mature developmental themes than we may think on first glance. And that's the purpose of the show, is to kind of dive into what are those things and why is it important that we look at Wayne from the perspective of somebody who is learning a different society and trying to adapt to it, and also finding his own identity in the midst of what society is telling him he ought to be.
And I mean, that's the same thing for Wax. They're both going about the same issue in a different way. Wayne is overcompensating by refusing to bow down to their belief systems of money and power. But at the same time, he constantly adapts different accents from different people. And he pulls in a lot of different information from different parts of the city. And he makes friends with most random people on street corners because he wants to be a part of it. But he doesn't want to be controlled by it. Waxillium is a different character because he's so high up in the hierarchy of the city that he has to change to maintain this power, but he also has to be himself. And Steris' support of him is really, really cool. And she's like, well, you know, every husband must have their hobbies. And she first says it as like an excuse for him. And then she says it like as an explanation. And then she says it as like a playful, you better not put away your guns because they're sexy.
Mm-hmm. And their relationship is really, really sweet because it starts off with Waxilium not liking her.
And her not liking him. They're marrying purely, she wants a title and he wants her money.
And as things grow and as they go on adventures and as they spend time and as he finds out how helpful she is and how clever and how she just operates on a different level.
And the biggest thing is when he shoots them up into the air on a coin and they're flying above the clouds, she is looking around filled with joy, excitement, and wonder, which is what a coin shot should feel. And anyone else he's ever flown with in these books has always been afraid, which is a really big thing. And I think it's really cute.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful love story that's very interesting and different. One other thing that I want to talk about real quick is Brandon Sanderson has confirmed that Wayne has PTSD, and that is shown through his hatred of guns.
So he, like, even holding a gun, he shakes because he can't handle holding it. And then holding a bullet, he has to toss the bullet up in the air because if he holds on to it, he starts shaking. He's so averse to the fact that he murdered someone as a kid.
Which is powerful, and it explains so much of him as a character that it's not just the fact that he can't touch a gun where his PTSD is affecting him. It's affecting him in how he interacts with the world around him, some of the self-punishment of allowing himself to be injured because he knows he'll heal, but he maybe still feels like he deserves some punishment and some injury. And it's just an interesting way to look at this character and to see somebody who is hurting from a past wound and trying to figure out, how do I live with the knowledge of what I've done? And I think Waxilium does the same thing. And he struggles deeply with the trauma of losing his wife, then finding out his wife wasn't who he thought she was.
And then killing her again.
And so it's this big cycle of a lot of trauma. And I think that in our real world and in books, it's really easy for us to look over something and not think about it as traumatic and not recognize the psychological impact that an event can have.
And it can happen in less than a second, right?
Right.
Something traumatic can happen to you in the blink of an eye.
And if we take Wayne as an example of this, he's able to create a bubble around him where time moves faster. And for him, he's able to change costumes and change his persona and even come close to dying inside a speed bubble. And nobody else is able to react to it until it's all said and done.
Sound is distorted. Nothing can leave the bubble. Like if you shoot a gun through a speed bubble, it deflects. And so he is alone in sound. He's alone in vision. He's alone in time.
Which is often how people who have been through trauma or who are struggling with mental health or just struggling with sadness, loss, or failure feel, is like they're inside this bubble. And the most beautiful thing that we can do, and one of the most powerful things that Wayne does throughout the books, is when he invites somebody into his bubble to fight with him.
That's really interesting. When he brings powerful. I want to talk about Steris more. Steris is very organized. Mm-hmm. She's very neat. She has lists, and she wants so badly to appear normal that the more stressed she feels, the more normal she acts. And so her sister, Marcy, tells Waxilium at one point, well, you should go talk to Steris. She's really stressed. And he looks over and he's like, well, she's just doing needlework. And she's like, well, yeah, needlework is a very normal thing to do. So she's doing it because she wants to feel normal. And she doesn't right now. So she hates doing needlework. That's how badly stressed she is. And just the depth of her character in that is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And you said that Steris is on the autism spectrum.
She is on the autism spectrum. Sanderson said that she is not as impacted by it as Renarin is, but that she is on the spectrum. And what I really liked was in the brief question that was asked, his response said, Steris is on the spectrum. she would have what we used to call Asperger's, which shows a lot of understanding that Sanderson has about mental health issues, because that's a relatively new change. And so, yeah, Steris is on the autism spectrum. And once you see that, it kind of gives some context to why her interactions with others are a little bit off. They don't seem to connect in the same way. And she doesn't seem to pick up on some of the social cues or the emotional cues that she receives.
And the lack of noticing those cues leads her to go to parties with pre-planned jokes. She writes out jokes beforehand. She writes out conversations beforehand. She's very controlling of what she says, and she doesn't do much off the cuff. So when she climbs on top of a train and shoots a gun at someone to save Wax's life, and when she jumps out of a window with him and does all these exciting things that break her purposeful control, is what leads him to falling in love with her, and what leads her to realizing that she loves him.
And that it's okay to be herself. That she doesn't have to create this facade and act in a certain way to be accepted, but that if she is herself and with people who know her and care for her, at least in the very minimum of wanting to keep her alive, that they will soon fall in love with her, like we see Waxilium do, because he understands a little bit more. And I think that's such a beautiful way of looking at it, that all behavior makes sense in its context. And once we have a little bit more context, once we understand a person a little bit more, it's so much easier to see the behaviors that may have once annoyed us and to say, okay, that's actually, like, it's kind of sweet that they're doing that, because I can see why they're doing this.
Why? Yeah. Now that I know the context, it's an explanation. And I feel like humankind, in so many ways, is constantly in need of explanation. It's kind of our thing. Other animals don't care where food comes from. They don't care about the rain or the weather. They don't wonder. But that's the big human thing, is wonder, which I think is pretty awesome.
We highly encourage that you read the Mistborn series. It's so good. And we also did a video on the outline of everything that's happened. Well, the important things that have happened
in these 4 books, these 3 books that encompass Wax and Wayne's story.
And we suggest you look at it. It's in the link below.
And if you want to know more about Sanderson, check out our Sanderson video that we released a couple of weeks back. And also comment if you think we left something out or said something that you disagree with. We want to hear about it. So comment down there in the YouTube comments, subscribe, and hit that bell so you know when we have something new come out.
Also, comment below and congratulate Peter. He is going to be having another child soon. And because of that, we're going to let him have some paternity leave, unpaid, of course. And I will be having a few individuals on the show to try to step into the big shoes that Peter wears. Size 12?
Yep.
Yep.
Catch you next time.